President Trump has a New Year's message for the world. America wants fewer illegal drugs, an end to wars, and more peace and prosperity. But don't be fooled. He will do what it takes to get there. He put Iran on serious notice yesterday.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading that they're building up weapons and other things. And if they are, they're not using the sites that we obliterated, but they're using possibly different sites.
Iran's regime facing big problems at home, massive protests there, the biggest in 3 years over the country's horrific economy and continued political repression. Iranian security forces responding with batons and tear gas last night. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett posting this rallying cry to the protesters.
The Iranian people have a glorious past, and they can have an even more glorious future. That future depends on each and every one of you. So to all the brave men and women now rising up across your country, all the nations of the free world stand with you in your just struggle. Change is possible.
Iran, as well as Hamas, was top of the list on the agenda when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Mar-a-Lago yesterday. Lucas Tomlinson has more from West Palm Beach, Florida. It's been a busy holiday week, Lucas.
It sure has, Julie. Good morning. It was the 5th time the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited with President Trump in the United States, this time at Mar-a-Lago. It's also looking to be the last foreign leader to visit with President Trump this year. And any potential reported rift between the two leaders seemed to be put to rest yesterday when the president said this about Hamas.
We talked about Hamas and we talked about disarmament. And they're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm. If they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay.
There's nothing subtle there, Julie. Now, today, the Treasury Department announcing new sanctions on 10 individuals and entities based in Venezuela and Iran, including a Venezuelan company that has contributed to Iran's drone trade with Venezuela. The announcement comes one day after President Trump admitted the U.S. was behind the strike, destroying suspected drug boats moored in Venezuela earlier this month, marking the first strikes ashore. U.S. forces have now launched strikes in Venezuela, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, the Caribbean, and Eastern Pacific this year. That's part of the president's Peace Through Strength initiative. Netanyahu was the second world leader to visit the winter White House in as many days. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine sat down with our colleague Brett Baer in an exclusive interview and reacted to Trump saying Putin wants Ukraine to succeed. Here's the interview.
You don't agree with that?
No, it's not about agree. I don't trust Russians, and they don't want. I mean, this. I'm not. I don't trust Putin, and he doesn't want success for Ukraine.
And combat operations continue in Syria. Just a few minutes ago, the U.S. Central Command, responsible for all American forces in the Middle East, said U.S. and partnered forces, likely Syrian forces, have been battling ISIS and have killed or captured 25 ISIS fighters in the past 2 weeks since those American airstrikes hit 70 ISIS targets in Syria after those 2 American soldiers from the Iowa National Guard and their American interpreter were killed this month. Right. Julie?
Lucas Tomlinson, thank you. The Wall Street Journal editorial board calls yesterday's meeting a showcase of the Trump-Netanyahu united front. An excerpt: if Iran accumulates enough missiles, it could overwhelm the air defenses of Israel and other U.S. allies, even without a nuclear weapon. A united front on Iran is the best way to pressure the regime to come to a deal limiting its nuclear and missile programs so Israel doesn't have to strike again. Some of Trump's advisors would like him to restrain Israel across all fronts. But Israel has taken from the war of October 2023 one lesson above all. It can never again allow jihadists to reign and build up military power with impunity on its borders. That's a policy worthy of U.S. support. Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, joins me now. She's also Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy for the Heritage Foundation. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Good morning, Julie. Good to be with you.
Let's begin with Iran, because the threat is real, and the president is not mincing words when he says that they will attack again. Where do you think they're currently enriching their weapons, considering that many of their sites were demolished by the United States? But the president says that there are other states that are still up and running.
Right. And this has been the president's bottom line, both in his first term and his second term, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. No. That's the fundamental national security issue that concerns the United States. And so that's why he acted in the B-2 bomber strike in June that was so decisive. But he said at the time, you know, we're going to assess, we're going to see what they're doing. If they do the right thing and don't reconstitute, then we can consider the matter closed. If they do the wrong thing, which they've been doing for 50 years, by the way, and continue to try to pursue a nuclear weapon, we know we can go in and strike. And they can't do anything about it. They don't have air defenses to stop us. So that's really our mission there.
Iran and Russia are very similar. They cannot be trusted. Last year, the Office of the National Intelligence Director reported that with continued enrichment, Iran already had enough fissile material to make more than a dozen nuclear weapons. Maybe more alarming, the Islamic Republic's conventional arsenal, a vast array of more than 3,000 ballistic missiles with a variety of ranges. And it has successfully tested at least one to a distance of 2,000 kilometers, more than 1,200 miles to be exact. That is capable of reaching inside Israel's closest border. And that is exactly why these meetings between Trump and Netanyahu are absolutely critical, because as we know, Israel will never stand back again after October 7th and allow for Iran to have its hands in killing more of their people.
Exactly. And that's why the threat from Hamas is intolerable after October 7th. That can't be tolerated. But then also, as you're just reporting, the direct threat from Iran. And so we've had two engagements with Israel and Iran over the course of the 2-year war with Hamas, where Iran launched these massive missile strikes on Israel. Fortunately, Israel and the United States, our exquisite joint missile defense capabilities, fought those off, but it's a real danger. And so, no, I think what we saw was a great show of unity from the Prime Minister and the President yesterday. Right. There's a cottage industry of left-leaning media, certainly not you, but media who want to see a rift. They want to see friction. They report these disagreements. It's just not real. Having been in the room with both of them, they are absolutely in lockstep on this issue.
As they should be. Victoria Coates, thank you so much for talking to us, and Happy New Year to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
And joining us now, MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's also the author of the weekly Substack newsletter Home and Away, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, former commander of U.S. Army Europe, and Hofstra University professor of law James Sample, an expert in constitutional law. David, I'll begin with you to help lay the groundwork here. What exactly do we know at this time about this CIA strike that took place last week?
So the CIA is declining to comment. As are members of Congress, this kind of strike, the Gang of Eight, this would be the members of Congress from both parties who serve on the intelligence committees and other senior congressional officials should know about these kind of strikes. The sense that they're not commenting suggests that they did occur. And since it would be classified and they can't comment on them, it was a dock that, as you've talked about, was apparently used by a cartel or drug traffickers to transit drugs out of Venezuela. But this is a dramatic escalation, A, because it's attack on Venezuela itself. B, it's a shift back to this idea of somehow pressuring the flow of drugs as a way to get at Maduro. And as you mentioned, the main thrust last week and what seemed to be a more effective tactic was trying to shut off the flow of oil from Venezuela. That's what really threatens the Maduro regime. And then our colleague, David Noriega, an MS Now reporter, he's heard from people who support aggressive action against Maduro that they're frustrated. They want the administration to be more aggressive in its use of force or more consistent in its tactics, and that this kind of back and forth and shifting in tactics and explanations may be emboldening Maduro.
You know, James, there are more than a few premises this administration has asked us to accept without sharing with us hard public evidence. But even if you're accepting or arguing that these people are terrorists or they are enemy combatants, is it legal to strike a dock in a sovereign nation?
The rhetoric and the labels help a lot in the court of public opinion. They may help ultimately in domestic courts as well. But on an international law level, let's be clear, there are two options. This is either illegal under international humanitarian law, which the United States subscribes to, or it's illegal under the law of armed conflict. One of those two scenarios applies. The United States is arguing in a secret OLC memo that no one has seen outside the administration that this is an armed conflict with Venezuela. Now, the administration certainly has the power to make that reality true. They can make that manifest, right, by creating an armed conflict. But if this is an international armed conflict and therefore subject to the law of armed conflict, these individual actions, for example, the boat strikes on individuals who at most, even under the allegations and even under the labels, are guilty of criminal activity. That is activity that is the subject of law enforcement, not murder.
Richard, look, the justification for these strikes, the story around these strikes just keeps shifting. First, of course, we're told this is all about the drug war. Then Susie Wiles, of course, close to Trump, leading operations in the White House. You know, she makes comments in that explosive Vanity Fair profile saying that this is about trying to make Maduro cry uncle. And then we start to hear people on the right, figures around President Trump and Trump himself, signal that, well, actually, this might be about oil and resources. Can you help me decode what's going on here?
The fourth option, which is all of the above. I think to some extent, in a very limited way, it's about drugs. It's much more about regime change and gaining access to Venezuelan oil. And I think that a big part of this administration's foreign policy has been what? It has been focusing on the Western Hemisphere, check. It has been commercial opportunity, check. It's also been about stopping immigration. Venezuela has lost over 8 million people over the last, 5 or 10 years. So it seems to me it's central to this administration's foreign policy. The real question is, what if small amounts of gradually increasing military force don't work? Gradualism, incrementalism allows the other side to adjust. So I'm not sure it's the wisest approach, but if a little bit of force doesn't work, well, then what? Do you back off or do you introduce a lot of force? This administration tends to be against large-scale interventions. So I know what they want. Again, like everything else in foreign policy, it's a means-ends challenge, and I'm not sure the means and the ends are lining up here.
General Hertling, as you and I have talked about these strikes sort of one after another as they've occurred. And I'm curious if you're at all concerned about the role of military lawyers right now. Traditionally, at least the public assumes that they are involved in the planning, that they are assessing these actions before they actually happen. But are you at all concerned as you see all of this unfold that what they might actually be doing is finding the story, the justification after the fact?
Extremely concerned about it, Antonio. And it goes back to what David was saying about the legalities. The legalities of international law, the legalities of armed conflict, the legalities associated with what is combat, what is declaring war on another country. Going into sovereign territory violates the UN Charter. It's what we've been talking about, what Russia has been doing for the past 4 years. So we have become somewhat like them in terms of what we're doing illegally to get that end state that Richard was just talking about. And when you talk end state, it's just not ends and means, it's also ways you do things. The other thing I'd bring up too is there's been a lot of talk about the term regime change. That's begun to roll off the tongues of policymakers and even cable news and campaign surrogates. That seems to be the mama bear on the menu of military options. It's less than a full-scale invasion, but it's more than a few boat strikes. But truthfully, regime change is not a military mission. When you start getting into that option where you're really talking about changing a regime, you're running into a whole lot of problem because there are things that have to be done at the State Department, within the intelligence community, to reinforce the military in terms of what they're doing, even if that's the mission you want to accomplish. And the administration doesn't seem to be doing any of those things beyond just using strikes. And that scares me as a military guy who knows the type of planning that goes into these kinds of operations.
I want to go back to the question of regime change in a moment. But James, if you were providing legal advice to a member of the military who's part of the chain of command here involved in these strikes, would you be concerned that they had personal liability for their actions?
I would be concerned. I think I'd be more concerned than seems to be the level of concern that has been the way in which this has been approached so far, at least based on reporting. We do get the sense that there have been some individuals along the chain of command and along the chain of legal advice who have expressed concerns. Those concerns, however, have been overruled, have been dismissed.
And we know from the reporting, too, that some of them are seeking outside counsel.
That's absolutely right. And we've obviously seen high-profile resignations in the military as well. So yes is the answer to the question, because basically what we're talking about here with respect to the sovereignty of a nation, look, Maduro is a well-regarded bad guy, right? That is fairly universally acknowledged at this point. But bad guy or not, this particular drone strike in the sovereign territory of another foreign country without that country's consent goes against Article 51 of the UN Charter. The United States isn't under attack in any credible way. And the individuals who are at sea, those are individuals who are miles and miles from any potential harm to the United States and could easily be interdicted without death. These are serious, serious matters as a matter of international law, and eventually, maybe if Congress does its job, as a matter of domestic law as well.
Richard, do you have questions about the role the CIA and the military may have played in this dock strike? It hasn't been entirely clear from the reporting exactly who was engaged in this action last week. And I think more broadly, I think it's just been interesting to see as the president sort of hinted toward a covert action there, a sort of an odd way to roll out this sort of information, of this sort of level of gravity and seriousness. What does the CIA's potential involvement and activity in Venezuela right now signal to you about the bigger picture?
Look, there's nothing new about the CIA playing a paramilitary role around the world. That's been a trend in recent years. The president talking about it, it's an odd thing, an overt, covert action. Normally you do these things for reasons of deniability. We seem to want to have it both ways, to deny it, but also to put overt pressure on the regime. Again, our policy is one about ratcheting up the pressure. We can have long conversations about legality. I may disagree with the others here. I'm not sure attacking a place where, if you could prove that drugs were being unloaded meant to come to the United States, that's necessarily illegal. Sovereign governments have the obligation to make sure their territory is not used for things like terrorism or drugs that could kill Americans. So yeah, I would say that's something of a potential gray area. But I think the real conversation, as it always is less about law and it's more about policy.
Now to the first known U.S. strike on Venezuelan soil. President Trump says that the U.S. hit a Venezuelan dock where drugs were allegedly being loaded onto boats, a major escalation in this ongoing military campaign. Questions now swirling over the potential next targets and whether this could escalate into an all-out war. Let's bring in retired Army Colonel Seth Crumich. Seth, great to have you here. Based on what we know, who do you think carried out this strike? Who ordered this strike? How did they do it?
So thanks, Elizabeth. You know, when you look at the messaging that President Trump put out over the last few months, he said the U.S. administration would apply military strikes and covert strikes. Covert strikes being unique messaging from the president, because normally those stay in the shadows. So when we look at the initial reports that have come in, it sounds like this was a CIA strike earlier in the month at this logistics port hub that is facilitating the narco network. Now, what's truly unique about this is normally covert actions stay covert. The president has come out and said, hey, we did this. And, you know, the takeaway when I talk to our Global Guardian intelligence teams or our teams in Venezuela or Latin America, we're in agreement that there must be some additional value for the president to come out and highlight the fact that we did this strike, which normally would not be something that we would do. And what I believe is that this is all about pressure on Maduro. We've been doing strikes on drug boats and then seeing what the reaction is from the Maduro regime and the population. Then it was the maritime interdictions of the oil tankers, then doing an assessment to see what happened there, and then figuring out what the next steps were going to be. I think this dock strike is now the next step, and we're going to go into an assessment phase. And if we don't see the results that we're looking for from a U.S. perspective, then you will see follow-on strikes. I think you'll see something more land-based, not necessarily in Caracas, but looking at narco infrastructure, maybe towards the Colombian border, something along those those locations. But make no mistake, this is going to continue until the U.S. gets the outcome they want, and I believe that is the ousting of the Maduro government.
Well, that was exactly my next question, Seth, because what is the result that the U.S. wants here? What's the end game as far as you see it?
So the end game is the ouster of Maduro, but make no mistake, let's use the oil vessels as an example. When we grabbed the first, I shouldn't say grabbed, when we took these sanctioned oil vessels over, the reaction in the Venezuelan ports was really astounding. Most of the shadow fleet stayed in port, which means oil wasn't flowing from Venezuela. Well, if the oil's not leaving Venezuela, then money's not coming back into Venezuela. And the so what means this already fragile economy that's suffering from inflation, things are about to get a lot worse. And when that happens, you're going to see revolution ingredients begin to percolate up, and you're going to see real pressure on Maduro. So that's what I'm looking for. This has to be an organic revolution if you're going to remove Maduro and his government. So I'm looking for those after effects, because make no mistake, we can talk about the narco effects, but we truly believe this is about removing that government. And when that happens, there's going to be a potential follow-on effect in Cuba as well.
That's really fascinating to think about the oil, those revenues being lost as a way to kind of spur revolution in Venezuela. Is there any sort of argument there that it's also something that could benefit the U.S., you know, trying to cut off that supply, get access to the oil?
Absolutely. I think for us, it's all about the national security strategy that was released earlier this month. For the first time, as far back as I can remember, and I've been doing this for over 30 years, the national security strategy, it really prioritized the Western Hemisphere as a place that we're going to focus on and really focus our resources, whether they're military, intelligence, economic, with the desired end state to create a more U.S.-friendly and stable Western Hemisphere, removing some of the nefarious players like China, Russia, and Iran, who have deep footprints in Venezuela and Cuba, for example. So when you look at this, it's going to be interesting.
Really interesting. I look forward to hearing more of your insights on this. Colonel Seth Crumrick, thanks so much for your time, and happy early New Year to you.
You too. Thank you.
Sexualizing your body makes you a better person.
Are you recording?
I'm gonna record you. Yes.
Do you want me to throw water on you? I am racist.
So idiot, for
and
real.
you are an
idiot. No,
I am racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful.
You ruin your life, by the way.
Oh, you talk about respect? You talking about respect? You are fired from this place, man. You're not gonna be working here. Sakwa. Look how you talking about ugliness?
Did I stutter?
You're the ugliest person I ever seen in my life.
Good.
We're not? No, we're not. No, we're not.
Because you know.
All right, happening right now on your screen, President Trump greeting Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in front of Mar-a-Lago. The two are meeting today, hoping to make some progress on moving toward step 2 of the ceasefire plan. The president's talking right now. Let's see if we can listen in.
For the last 3 days.
President Trump, are you going to have a green light for another attack in Iran?
Go ahead. Mr. President, how quickly should folks move to phase 2 of the peace plan for Gaza?
As quickly as we can. But there has to be a disarmament, you know, that we have to disarm with Hamas. So one of the things we'll talk about, certainly, but there has to be a disarming of Hamas. Otherwise, very quickly. Yeah.
Can you say anything more about the explosion in Venezuela that you mentioned in a radio interview? Did the military do that? Can you share any more details about
Well, it doesn't matter, but there was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
Is that the only strike that the U.S. has done?
I don't want to comment on
Mr. President.
President Trump. Yesterday there was an explosion overnight, and the Russians say that Ukraine tried to hit the residence of President Putin. Do you have any information?
No, I don't know about it, actually, and I don't, I just heard about it, actually, but I don't know about it. No.
Did you speak with
That would be too bad. That would not be good.
What was the outcome of your telephone call with President Putin this morning?
I had a very good talk this morning. I waited till this morning because it was pretty late by the time we finished, like 2:30 in Russia, 2:30 in the morning. And we had a very good talk. We spoke at 8 o'clock in the morning hour time, and it was a very productive talk. I mean, we have a few very thorny issues, as you can imagine. He knows about thorny issues probably better than anybody in the world, but it's working out. We have a couple of issues that we're going to get resolved, hopefully, and if we get them resolved, you're going to have peace. You're going to have Ukraine. They're losing 26,000 soldiers a month. Can you believe it? A month, 26,000 young, beautiful soldiers, and plus some people in Kiev, and relatively small, but a lot, you know, still people, and it's a lot of people. But 26,000 soldiers were killed last month. Yes, please.
President Trump, are you going to allow Turkish forces, and do you expect Turkish forces to be stationed in Gaza?
So I have a great relationship with President Erdogan, and we'll be talking about it. And if it's good, I think that's good. And a lot will be having to do with Bibi. We're going to be talking about that. But Turkey's been great, and he's been, you know, excellent as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about you. To me, he's been very good.
Can you guarantee that?
Sure. Mr. President, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu and how important it is for you to see him be pardoned by the Israeli president?
Look, he's a wartime prime minister. He's done a phenomenal job. He's taken Israel through a very dangerous period of trauma. Israel, with other people, might not exist right now, if you want to know the truth. That's a pretty big statement, but it's true. I feel that. You had the wrong prime minister. Israel right now would not exist because they were met with a force the likes of which very few countries could have handled. And we worked together, and we were extremely victorious, to put it mildly. Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter. You know, they could have made a deal the last time before we went through, you know, a big attack on them, and they decided not to make the deal. They wish they made that deal. So I think, again, they should make a deal. They want to make a deal, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Yeah, please.
Mr. Trump, hi. Nadav Elimelech, 24 News Israel. Would you support the overthrow of the Iranian regime?
Of who?
Iranian regime.
I'm not going to talk about overthrow of a regime. It's, they've got a lot of problems that are in. They have tremendous inflation. Their economy is bust. Their economy is no good. And I know that people aren't so happy, but don't forget, every time they have a riot or somebody forms a group, little or big, they start shooting people. You know, they kill people. And the people tend to, I've watched this for years. There's tremendous discontent. They form 100,000, 200,000 people. All of a sudden, people start getting shot. And that group disbanded pretty quickly. So I watched it for years. They're vicious, vicious people. Yeah.
Mr. President, will you support an attack, Israeli attack on Iran if Iran will not have a deal? If Iran will continue with their ballistic missiles and also nuclear weapons?
If they will continue with the missiles, yes. The nuclear, fast. Okay. One will be yes, absolutely. The other was, we'll do it immediately.
Mr. President, Yaron Abraham from Channel 12 News. What are your plans regarding Gaza for the next few weeks?
Well, we're going to be dealing on Gaza. That's why this very great prime minister is here right now. We're talking about Gaza. We're talking about a lot of things. We have about 5 major subjects that we're discussing, and Gaza will be one of those subjects.
Mr. President, can you guarantee that the last hostages on Philip will be released before we'll continue to the second phase of the Gaza plan?
Well, let's put it this way. Every hostage just about that's been released was released because of me, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, my whole team, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth. They were all released because of us. None were released in the Biden administration, none. They were all released because of us. Then we had a lack of releases with respect to the dead. And all of a sudden they started coming back because I said, nope, you said you were going to. We have one wonderful young man whose parents are right now inside. And he's, what beautiful parents, a beautiful brother, sister, and like a beautiful family, and they're waiting for their son. It's the only one left, and we're doing everything we can to get his body back. And the parents just said, hopefully he's alive. And I said, I'd love you to think that way. Okay?
President
So
Trump,
we're doing everything we can.
do you have President Trump?
Out of all of these people, and I'm not just talking about the final 20.
Right.
Look at all of the people. What do you think the total number is?
255.
255.
254 came out, one more.
Think of that. And we got them all.
President Trump, does the reconstruction of Gaza, President Trump, does the reconstruction of Gaza, does the reconstruction of Gaza will begin even before Hamas is disarmed?
I think it's going to begin pretty soon, yeah.
Before Hamas
He's looking forward to it, so am I. Look, what a mess. What a mess it is. And it's been a mess for centuries, really. It's been a mess for a long time. It's seems to be born for that, but we're gonna straighten it out. No, we're already starting certain things. We're doing things for sanitary conditions and others. But Gaza's a tough place. You know the expression, it's a tough neighborhood. It's truly a tough neighborhood. Yeah, you had a question in the back? Go ahead. Yeah, please, go ahead.
I'll ask you about the relationship between you and the Prime Minister.
What about it?
They said that there is no good relationship between you.
I don't think it can be better. We just won a big war together. You know, if we didn't beat Iran, you wouldn't have had peace in the Middle East because nobody would have been able, the Arab countries who have been fantastic would not have been able to make a deal. If we didn't wipe out their nuclear, we wiped it out. If we didn't wipe out with our beautiful B-2 bombers, if we didn't, and we sent a lot of Tomahawks in there also, by the way, from a submarine.
And what about the pardon that the President of Israel needs to give the Prime Minister?
A pardon?
A pardon.
Oh, I think he will. How do you not? He's a wartime prime minister who's a hero. How do you not give a pardon? You know, I think it's a very hard thing not to do it. I spoke to the president, and it's on. I mean, he tells me it's on its way.
Mr. President,
You can't do better than that, right? Please.
Mr. President, can I follow up on Venezuela? Was the facility taken out by the U.S. military, or was it another entity like the CIA?
Well, I don't want to say that. I know exactly who it was, but I don't want to say who it was. But you know, it was along the shore.
Mr. President, have you or anyone in your administration talked to Maduro in recent days?
Well, I spoke to him.
Recently?
Pretty recent. Reasonably, but nothing much comes of it. Yeah.
Mr. President, can you explain the importance?
You have to understand what he's done. They've sent billions of dollars of drugs in. But maybe just as bad, they've sent hundreds of thousands of people in from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions and insane asylums. The drug lords, the drug dealers were all sent into our country. But think of it, what he's done. Tren de Aragua, probably the worst gang. They cut off people's fingers. One man made a phone call to complain about them. He cut off their hand. They cut off his hand. Don't ever make a phone call again. We'll cut off your other hand. After that, we'll kill you, they said. That was in Colorado. No, they sent in all of the bad ones. They sent in some bad people. And that to me was just terrible. And they send in drugs. Now, I will say this, 97% of the drugs coming in by sea stopped. We're trying to figure out who the other 3% are. They have a hard time getting people to pilot those boats. But 97% of the drugs coming in by the ocean, by the sea, by water, are gone. Every boat that we take out, we save 25,000 lives of Americans. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you. We're going to have a big meeting, and we'll see you in a couple of hours if you'd like. And if you'd like, you can come up and have lunch like you did yesterday. Would you like that or not? Do you want that? Because some of them think it's terrible. It's a bribe. But, you know, a bribe for $25, I don't know. If you'd like, you can go. And if you don't, you can stand in a driveway and melt. All right? But if you want, will you work on that, Margot? Yes, sir. Is Margot doing a good job? She's a star. She's too nice. Her only problem, she's too nice to you. And you're not nice to us, but that's okay. Margot, take them up and have a beautiful lunch, and we'll see you later.
Are you worried that the alleged strike on Putin's residence could scuttle the peace?
Yeah, I don't like it. It's not good. I heard about it this morning. You know who told me about it? President Putin told me about it. Early in the morning, he said he was attacked. It's no good. It's no good. Don't forget, you know, the Tomahawks. I stopped the Tomahawks. I didn't want that. Because we're talking about, you know, it's a delicate period of time. This is not the right time. It's one thing to be offensive, because they were offensive. It's another thing to attack his house. It's not the right time to do any of that, and can't do it. And I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it. Please. What? Well, it came out. Well, we'll find out. I mean, you're saying maybe the attack didn't take place. It's possible too, I guess. But President Putin told me this morning it did.
One question, Mr. President. Can you expound on the importance of a strong relationship with the state of Israel? And Mr. Prime Minister, you called President Trump the strongest friend for the state of Israel. You worked with numerous administrations, numerous presidents. Can you expound on that and what makes President Trump such a strong friend for the state of Israel?
Why don't you go first?
I'll say it again and again and again. We've never had a friend like President Trump in the White House. It's not even close. And I think you can judge that by not merely by the frequency of our meetings, but by the content and the intensity. I think Israel is very blessed to have President Trump leading the United States, and I'll say leading the free world at this time. I think it's not merely Israel's great fortune. I think it's the world's great fortune.
Well, I just want to say that it's very important who the Prime Minister and President of Israel is. We have a great relationship. It was an honor to speak before your leaders. That was a great honor for me. I think it has not happened before, or something they told me. But the relationship's been extraordinary, and Bibi's a strong man. He can be very difficult on occasion, but you need a strong man. If you had a weak man, you wouldn't have Israel right now. Israel would have been, you know, Israel with most other leaders would not exist today. They would not exist. And now they're stronger than ever. Yeah, please.
Are you going to ask Netanyahu to sign this agreement with Syria?
Well, I hope he's going to get along with Syria, because the new president of Syria is working very hard to do a good job. He really is. I know he's a tough cookie, and he's...
Breaking overnight, a CNN exclusive. Sources say the CIA carried out a drone strike on a port facility on Venezuela's coast earlier this month. This is the first known U.S. attack on a target inside the country. Now, before this, the U.S. had only conducted strikes on suspected drug trafficking boats in international waters, destroying more than 30 vessels in the Caribbean Sea. You can see some of the images of what we've seen to this point, and this has typically been in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific. Now, President Trump first acknowledged the strike on a remote Venezuelan dock in an interview last week.
And we just talked out, I don't know if you read or you saw,
They have a big plant or a big facility where they send where the ships come from. 2 nights ago, we knocked that out. So we hit them very hard.
I want to bring in CNN's Kevin Liptak, who's in Palm Beach, Florida, for us. So, Kevin, what can you tell us about this new escalation, really, at this point?
Yeah, and it is a major escalation. You know, President Trump has been threatening for weeks now to begin action on land in Venezuela. Now that we're learning that that has actually begun, it does seem to signal a much more aggressive phase in this pressure campaign on the leader there, Nicolas Maduro. Now, what sources tell us is that this CIA drone strike took out a facility on a dock on the coast of Venezuela where the U.S. government believes the gang trender Aragua was loading up ships with drugs for onward shipping. Now, there was no one in the facility at the time, so there were no casualties. But I think the way all of this came to light is also extraordinary. You know, CIA operations are normally shrouded in secrecy, and unless President Trump had sort of let it slip in that radio interview, which I would note was with a billionaire Republican donor, it's possible that we may never have known that this had happened. And the president over at Mar-a-Lago yesterday was not particularly forthcoming about what all of this looked like. He said it was a major explosion in a dock area. He said they load the boats up with drugs, we hit all the boats, and that this was the implementation area. I was over there and I asked the president point blank whether this was a military strike or whether this was some sort of CIA action, and the president said, "I don't want to say that. I know exactly who it was." So you hear him there sort of not revealing any more details than he let slip in that radio interview. You know, the president did authorize the CIA to take action inside Venezuela earlier this year, but this is really the first we're hearing of what exactly they've been up to in that country. You know, the focus really publicly from the administration has been those strikes on the alleged drug boats. And yesterday, the Pentagon announced that they had struck the 31st boat. This was in international waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean. They say that it was transiting a known narco trafficking route and that 2 alleged narco traffickers were killed. But as with previous strikes, they didn't provide any evidence to back up those claims. That, of course, has drawn all kinds of scrutiny from Congress, who say that this could amount to extrajudicial killing. And so now that we know that these actions have begun on the ground in Venezuela, certainly does signal that we're entering a new phase of this pressure campaign, Omar.
Yeah, a phase that in some ways had been projected, and to your point, we just were waiting to see what that would actually look like if it happened, and here we have the reporting. Kevin Liptak, thank you so much.
President Trump appeared to first acknowledge the operation late last week during a radio interview.
And we just talked out, I don't know if you read or you saw, they have a big plant or a big facility where they send where the ships come from. 2 nights ago, we knocked that out. So we hit them very hard.
All right, now joining the group chat, Kim Dozier, CNN Global Affairs Analyst. Kim, thank you for being with us and joining us. I want to get your expertise and your thoughts on this first, both on what he said in that interview Friday, but also what he said on Monday when asked about the attack. So let's listen to what he said there on Monday.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
Okay, so he's talked about this twice now.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a CIA attack, right? CIA is usually covert, right? What's going on here?
So it makes me wonder if this was planned or he forgot when he was briefed that this was a covert operation. Now, when something like this takes place, usually certain members of Congress are briefed, certain people throughout the interagency process, and they will keep their mouths shut until the act itself becomes public. And I think that's why you're now seeing the details released, because he's just outed what was supposed to be a deniable operation. He's also let the enemy know there could be more of this coming. So now you've got Venezuelan operators on the ground thinking about counter-drone operations. Apparently, there was no one, according to CNN's reporting, when the strike happened at this facility. You can bet now they're going to have guards at all of these facilities because they're now vulnerable.
Well, and that kind of gets to what I was going to ask next, which is I don't want to lose sight of, what are the consequences? Yeah. What are the reasonings for keeping these operations covert? What are the consequences when they become public?
Well, when you have a drone, it's obviously that's not going to put troops in harm's way. It is a way of harassing the drug cartels, the Venezuelan regime. It's unlikely to unseat Venezuelan strongman Maduro, but at least it shows that the U.S. is doing something, and it seems it's almost performative, and that's possibly why Trump brought it up in public.
Okay. So I do want to hit on kind of the motives here of Venezuela attacks in general, because the president has also not shied away from the idea of regime change in Venezuela, right? So, Maria, what do you see this being here? Is this regime change? What is the motive in your eyes?
I think that is the big question. What is the motive? And I think this goes to something that Kim said, which is this. Is it planned? Is this just something that Donald Trump blurted out because he forgot it was a covert operation? He first said, as we mentioned at the beginning of this program, that it was all about narcotics. Then they seize an oil tanker, and he talks about how he wants American companies to seize the oil. Then he talks about
Wiles also talking about that in an interview, right?
Exactly. Now it's about regime change. So what is it? The fear here, I think, of Americans, and I go back to the MAGA base, which is, I think, a big problem that he has, but Brian knows more about that, because this is not what the MAGA base wanted from somebody like Donald Trump, who promised not to get involved in foreign wars, and that's exactly what he's doing now. But what is the strategy? Has he briefed Congress? Is there an out? Is there a plan? There is no plan. And when the American people are hurting about how they are going to make ends meet, this is how they see their taxpayer money being spent. It's not a great political move for the president.
Listen, I would add, Kim, you got it right. You said the enemy. Clearly, Venezuela is an enemy of the United States. They've made that position abundantly clear. We've now seen reports, in major media outlets that Hezbollah is making inroads in Iran, is making inroads in Venezuela. We know Venezuela plays a critical role to Cuba, and it's always been the U.S. policy of regime change in Cuba.
But we have a lot of enemies, and we're not.
Yeah, but not in our hemisphere like that. These guys are in our hemisphere. And what we've always done in the history of the United States is when somebody comes in our hemisphere and threatens our hemisphere, we flex our muscle. And we should never apologize for flexing our muscle in our hemisphere. And so I think there's multiple things going on with Venezuela. Obviously, there's the drug component that allows them to come in and do something. There's the regime change component that is critical. But this Laja Maduro does so many more things for the region, Cuba, for other things of having these dictators in the region that are welcoming our enemies, that are welcoming North Korea, that are welcoming Iran, that are welcoming, Russia, that are welcoming China. Like, that doesn't work in our hemisphere. And we have a president that's finally saying, you know what, enough. And whether I think he will ultimately, more and more people will be briefed, because there is a case to be made. But I think it's an incremental, pressure, more and more pressure, and we're going to see that. And now that we're talking about it, there's going to be more debate about it, and there is a story that the president can tell of why this is needed.
Right. And I do. You just did it more eloquently than he ever has, and I don't think he's going to repeat what you just said.
I'm doing a magnificent, big, beautiful ballroom that the country has wanted, the White House has wanted for 150 years. It's a massive job, and it's a tiny fraction of that number. And we're under budget and ahead of schedule. Now, it's bigger than I told you. After realizing we're going to do the inauguration in that building, it's got all bulletproof glass. It's got all they call it drone-free roof. So drones won't touch it. It's a big, beautiful, safe building.
President Trump yesterday defending his new ballroom, but former Bush advisor Karl Rove has a new column in the Wall Street Journal that recaps the good, the bad, and the ugly of 2025. And it reads in part this way. There are signs that the public is tiring of President Trump's hyperbole and insatiable desire for retribution. Increasingly, they may hear only the offensive or cruel things he says. Has the president convinced himself that he doesn't need to sell his policies and actions? It appears that he believes he can simply will people into agreeing with him by claiming his achievements are the biggest, best, and most amazing in American history. He's gone way too far by slapping his name on buildings like the Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and government programs, the Navy's Trump-class battleship. He might receive a fawning reaction from his MAGA base, but the average American finds such narcissism off-putting. Americans would be much more likely to support Mr. Trump if he explained what he's doing and asked for patience as his administration makes necessary changes. But that isn't his way. Presidents do best when they underpromise and overdeliver. The opposite, overpromising and underdelivering, angers voters. They often take out their anger at the ballot box. And Caddy, this is becoming like the central theme of this administration over the last month or two. That President Trump seems out of touch, that he's been out of touch with what got him elected a year ago. He's out of touch with what voters seem to really care about. He's still mostly calling affordability a hoax. Now he's starting to talk about pricing a little bit. You know, he's instead focusing on, okay, some foreign policy, that's fair, but a lot of also business deals that seem to enrich he and his family. Things like the Kennedy Center, things like the ballroom, which, you know, he was going on about yesterday. And Karl Rove makes the point that I'm hearing from more and more Republicans that they just feel like they can't count on Trump right now to talk about what they need him to talk about barreling into a midterms year.
Look, there's a bit of a paradox at the end of this year because we've had 2 weeks of pretty good economic data, right? Growth is doing well, inflation is coming down, and yet you've also had the last 2 weeks a couple of polls from the Pew Center and from Harris just yesterday that show that President Trump is losing support, not just with the population in general, but with those key people he needs to keep on side in order to do well in elections, and those are the swing voters. His support amongst, for example, Latino voters when it comes to the economy is way down. Amongst young voters, his support is down, particularly on those economic issues. And I do wonder whether things like the Kennedy Center, renaming the Kennedy Center. When you drive past it here in Washington, D.C., all of us who live in Washington, Eugene and me, you see it all the time. And you see that name, and it's kind of striking to see that. I drove past the United States Institute of Peace the other day. It's now the Donald Trump United States Institute of Peace. You see all the gold, as we spoke about yesterday, in the Oval Office, around the White House, on the walkways, those plaques. It is that imperial presidency and the trappings of imperial presidency, and those may just be things that are symbolic and perhaps in the long run they don't matter as much as some of his policies. But Eugene, I wonder whether actually those things rankle with Americans. I mean, you got rid of us for a reason a couple of hundred years ago, as far as I remember. You didn't want a king.
Exactly.
And so for people who are worried about prices, particularly, to see all of this bling and to see his name everywhere and to see him putting his name on a class of warship, does it just strike them as discord? It's not quite what American presidents are meant to be, it strikes me.
And it also says to them, you're not focused on me, right? That is something that Joe Biden learned the hard way, which, you know, it wasn't even doing any of this, even a quarter of what Donald Trump is doing. And I got deja vu when you were talking about the, you know, for Trump, some better numbers are coming this, you know, that we've seen at the end of this year. That was the story of the Biden administration. They had better macroeconomic numbers. They had the GDP was going up, the inflation was calming down, and every time we kept talking about that, but voters weren't feeling it. And it is more important than ever for politicians to make voters feel a certain way, and while working on the actual issues. And I think what's really interesting about Donald Trump and all of the names and the gold and all of that is the sheen of that is something that people in other countries, sometimes dictators do, right? Is where they make things look shiny, and that makes people feel like things are really good. And this president has convinced himself that he does not have to sell his policies to the American people, because he learned that through entertainment, that he can just say he's the best, and eventually people will believe him.
Yeah, Trump's been very good at asserting his own reality. We'll see, though, if that superpower is expiring. And Eugene's right. There are some growing parallels between this administration and the Biden presidency, sort of this disconnect about the economy and also increasing questions about the age and health of the chief executive.
So President Trump says he is not considering military strikes inside Venezuela as part of his campaign against drug traffickers. But at least one media report suggests otherwise. There's also a report that disputed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro is pleading with U.S. adversaries for help. A bipartisan group of senators now asking for more information. Senior national correspondent Aisha Hasni is at the White House tonight. Good evening, Aisha.
Shannon, good evening to you. The president has indicated previously that he would be open to moving his war on drugs from sea to land. But when it comes to a decision to strike within Venezuela, he's not there yet.
There are reports that you are considering strikes within Venezuela. Is that true?
No.
With just one word, President Trump shutting down a report from the Miami Herald that he's decided to strike military sites inside Venezuela at any moment.
That you made a decision on that?
No, it's not true.
Thursday, the Wall Street Journal reported the administration's pinned down targets used to transport drugs, but that the president hasn't made up his mind yet about striking. It comes as disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is now turning to Russia and China for help. The Washington Post reports Maduro is, quote, requesting defensive radars, aircraft repairs, and potentially missiles from Vladimir Putin, and expanded military cooperation from Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has a carrier strike group on its way to the Caribbean as it ramps up attacks on alleged drug boats. But bipartisan frustration is growing on Capitol Hill over whether these operations are legal.
We are violating the Constitution. There is supposed to be due process.
And over a lack of information from the Pentagon. Today, the top Republican and Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee complained they have yet to receive a response to their congressional inquiries about the legal rationale from War Secretary Pete Hegseth. More Republicans are now calling for more transparency after Senate Democrats were left out of a classified briefing the White House organized this week.
Give the same briefing to every Republican, to every Democrat in the United States Senate.
And Shannon, you'll want to pay attention to next week on Capitol Hill because Republican Senator Rand Paul is apparently joining forces with two Democrats, Adam Schiff and Tim Kaine, to potentially force a vote on a bill, a resolution to stop the president from unilaterally declaring war on Venezuela. Shannon?
Okay, so Aisha, also a federal judge just blocked the president's efforts to tighten up voter registration. It's been an ongoing issue for this president. What do we know about that?
So this is a big win today for Democrats and civil rights groups. They sued over the president's executive order, which required voters to prove their citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections. A federal judge in D.C. today ruled that is unconstitutional, writing this, because our Constitution assigns responsibility for election regulation to the states and to Congress. This court holds that the president lacks the authority to direct such changes. No reaction tonight just yet from the White House. Shannon.
All right. Aisha Hasni at the White House. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
The senior member of the House Armed Services Committee is Mike Turner, and he's here with me on the set in New York. Congressman, are we going to attack the cartels on land in Venezuela? I ask the question because why else would we have such a huge buildup of military power just off the coast of Venezuela?
Well, we don't know, but one thing is certain is that the administration is continuing to increase the pressure on Venezuela. And we all know that the administration's commitment to impacting the drug trade is real and is important. We all know that we have for too long allowed the drug trade unchecked to impact the lives of everyday Americans.
Are you going to get Maduro out one way or the other?
Well, I think the president certainly sees this as incredibly important and central, both for the Western Hemisphere, South America,
I'm trying to
Venezuela, the people in Venezuela. I mean, the people in Venezuela are being unbelievably impacted, and certainly the United States is, and the drug trade is. Now, tomorrow, the Armed Services Committee is going to be receiving a classified briefing on this. The Armed Services Committee has been receiving information from the administration. Now, I do believe that Congress needs to be receiving more information than they have from the administration. There are serious questions the administration has not been answering about the legal construct of this, even what the plans are in the future. I mean, Rand Paul has certainly raised some very critical questions concerning the construct and the manner in which these attacks are occurring, and many members want answers to these. As we've had classified briefings, members are asking the exact same questions that he publicly has been raising, and we have not been receiving the answers as to the legal construct of these. But
that's
the administration
side of it. I'm interested in the military side of it.
The administration's focus is appropriate, though, in that we have to address both the drug trade, the issue of how what's happening in Venezuela, both for our relations, what's happening for the Venezuelan people, what's happening in the Western Hemisphere, and I think this is a very important focus of the administration. How it's occurring is something that both Congress and the administration have to address together.
At that meeting tomorrow, do you expect the administration, it's a closed-door briefing, do you expect the administration to tell you what they've got in mind for Venezuela? Spell it out. Are they going to do that?
So the administration is sending legal counsel from the Department of Defense and from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they're going to have hard questions as to the manner in which this is being both planned and the manner in which this is being conducted. And certainly they will be having questions as to how they're looking at going forward and in how Congress is going to be engaged. These are important questions.
But they are indeed, and you're used to keeping secrets. You used to be on the Intelligence Committee, now the House Armed Services Committee. There's a limit to what you can say.
And these are classified briefings.
Yes.
And these are important issues.
What's going to happen. But you can tell us that the pressure is on to get Maduro out.
And this is this is an important issue for the security and the safety of the United States.
You have to be so careful what you say, I understand.
This is an important issue for the security and safety of the United States, but the administration cannot pursue this unchecked by Congress, and that's part of the central conversation that's going to be occurring tomorrow.
Okay, one last one. The government shutdown. Tell us about the dangers from 80% of the workers. I think it's the National Nuclear Security Administration. 80% of them have been furloughed. Where's the danger? What's the threat?
Right. So what we're trying to point out here is that the recklessness of what's occurring on the Senate side as the Democrats have continued to vote to shut down the government. We know that there's important functions that are occurring in the federal government as they shut down the federal government. But some of them are absolutely critical day to day to our functions of our safety and security. At the NNSA, you have people who are every day advancing the modernization of our nuclear weapons. While we have China and Russia every day advancing their nuclear weapons, announcing new nuclear weapons, we have our whole nuclear weapons portfolio that's coming to a grinding halt as people are being laid off. Our national security is at risk. Every day they go to the Senate floor and they vote to lay off people and cause cessation of important, incredible domestic programs that are impacting families across our country. They're also imperiling our national security.
With pressure like this, I would expect a settlement pretty soon. And it seems like that Schumer's coalition, his party, is beginning to crack.
Well, this is all about politics and drama as opposed to, the public, what's good for our country and what's good for national security. And all you have to look at is those three things and know that they are putting politics in front of their country.
A quick question on the auto pen. The report suggested that the pardons granted with the auto pen are invalid. Okay. What happens now? Pardons are rescinded?
I think what this report shows is that when you have a presidency that goes on autopilot, you have to look at the auto pen and what it could be doing. And because some of those things, when a presidency is on autopilot, the authorities of the presidency are dangerous to be in the hands of those who can use it in ways where an auto pen can execute those authorities of the presidency. And that's what this report is about.
Got it. Congressman Mike Turner, always a pleasure.
Thank you for
You're a natural-born diplomat. You realize that.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here, sir. Appreciate it.
It's moving along, and we'll end up getting it. Yeah, we're actually pursuing it. Can you imagine? Because it came from the wrong location. It came out of Venezuela, and it was sanctioned. Maybe we'll sell it. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we'll use it in the strategic reserves. We're keeping it. We're keeping the ships also. Venezuela took advantage of the open borders that Biden created more than any other country. Tren de Aragua, we had gangs all over.
That's President Trump on the U.S.'s pursuit of a third sanctioned oil tanker near Venezuela, further increasing pressure on Venezuelan oil exports. The Trump administration has been at odds with Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, saying that he's using oil money to fund narco-terrorists and drug trafficking into America. The U.S. military struck another alleged drug boat in the Eastern Pacific. This is the 29th such strike in the region. Let's check oil prices right now, well below $60 a barrel this morning, sitting at a level of $58.10 a barrel on crude oil. Joining me now is the chairman of the Torridon Group, and former energy secretary under President Trump, Dan Brulette. Dan, great to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Maria. Merry Christmas to you.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you. We thank you for that. I guess assess the backdrop for us in terms of the supply situation on oil as the United States once again flexes its muscle with all hands on deck on energy, which is President Trump's agenda.
It is indeed all hands on deck. And what we're seeing, Maria, in the marketplace today is an increased production here in the United States. We just set yet another record. I think we're now at 13.6 or perhaps even 13.7 or 8 million barrels a day of production here in the United States, which is phenomenal when you think about it. And I think it's a direct result of the regulatory structure that the president has put in place. Absolutely. He has removed many of the burdens that have been placed on this industry over a number of years.
So, and it's so important what you're talking about, the permitting process, loosening things up so that oil companies put money and investments and resources in place for a long-term period. How does the Venezuelan oil and this narco situation play into all of this?
Well, in the near term, it won't impact U.S. production very much. As you know, production, or at least the prices that are associated with production in the marketplace, tend to move in hours. Actual production supply takes quarters, so it's a little longer term. So all of these activities in Venezuela are not going to impact U.S. production very much in the near term. But what it will do is prevent this black market of energy, if you will. Those are the things that really distort the marketplace. When you look across the world and you see countries like Iran or Venezuela, or even China or India for that matter, buying black market oil, it really does distort the marketplace, and it really inhibits, I should say, certainty and production investment in places like the United States.
Yeah, it's a great point to make, because I know that under the Biden administration, Joe Biden allowed all of that black market activity to exist for Iran, and they were able to generate so much money in oil revenue to actually help those terrorist groups. But the Trump administration is also working to undo the Biden-era climate change agenda, canceling leases for major offshore wind farm projects currently under construction due to the national security risks. I spoke with Interior Secretary Doug Burgum about it yesterday. He broke the news on this program. Watch this.
The Department of War has come back conclusively that the issues related to these large offshore wind programs create radar interference that creates a genuine risk for the U.S. This is the most expensive electricity being produced in our country. In some cases, it's anywhere between 5 and 10 times more expensive than if we were doing it with the traditional, reliable, secure American sources like natural gas. This is a self-inflicted pricing issue for residents that live in that part of our country. These towers are gargantuan, 2.5 times higher than the Statue of Liberty, spinning at 150 to 200 miles an hour. One can understand how they would cause issues with casting radar shatters and clutter, as they call it, that create real issues for trying to determine, what's friend or what's foe in our airspace for our country.
Dan, he was talking about the expense of all of those wind projects and infrastructure, which are obviously now canceled. The leases have been paused.
He's right about that. These are the most expensive electrons in the marketplace today. And when you choose premium electrons, you're going to pay premium prices, which is why the mid-Atlantic parts of the Northeast pay exorbitant electricity rates in the country today. They have access to cheap natural gas in places like the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, but they refuse to permit pipelines to allow that gas to reach these important markets like New York, Boston, and other places. And the secretary is doing exactly the right thing here. And I think the president's doing exactly the right thing. He is pursuing affordable electricity, which is what we need. He's also pursuing firm baseload power, which is also what we need to meet the oncoming demand from data centers and other AI technologies.
Well, it's a great point to make about the data centers. I went to the Permian Basin recently, and I've got to tell you, Dan, what I saw was shocking. They have so much natural gas, which is coming up with the crude oil, and they don't have the pipeline infrastructure in place to carry the natural gas and distribute it to where it needs to go. You mentioned all this demand for data centers. They need natural gas. But you know what they were doing with the natural gas in the Permian Basin while I was there? They were flaring it up. So I'm seeing fires here and there of natural gas because they don't have the pipeline infrastructure to carry it, to take it where it needs to go. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells us we need more infrastructure, correct? I mean, we've talked about this in the past, Maria. Our challenge in America today is no longer production. As I've said before, we know how to produce molecules. We have abundant natural gas. We know how to produce electrons. Our challenge is getting those products to the marketplace. We need more pipeline capacity. We need more transmission capacity on the electricity side. That's been our challenge in America, and that leads back to a permitting conversation that I think the Congress really needs to get serious about.
Yeah, it all goes back to regulation, doesn't it? And deregulation.
It does.
Dan, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Good to see you, Maria.
All right, Dan Brulette, Merry Christmas to you.
Well, you know what the people are asking as we take a look at a map of the region and where these tankers are. By the way, the first one that we seized has made its way to Galveston, Texas. General, when you seize 2 ships and pursue a third, are you essentially declaring war on Venezuela?
I don't think it's a declaration of war. I think it is a means of putting economic pressure on. Now, when you put ground troops in, yeah, you really need to get some authorization from Congress for that because that's a campaign of indefinite duration once you put ground troops in. But this is a naval action to seize sanctioned ships. As far as we can tell, you're doing it with the Coast Guard resources. We've seized ships before. It's been done, and it's an easy way to put economic pressure on Maduro in Venezuela.
I'm curious your thoughts on what we heard from the Secretary of State, who held a very lengthy news conference partly on this, and the way he framed what he called a standoff in the Caribbean. Listen to Marco Rubio.
It is clear that the current status quo with the Venezuelan regime is intolerable for the United States. The status quo, that they operate and cooperate with terrorist organizations against the national interests of the United States. Not just cooperate, but partner with and participate in activities that threaten the national interests of the United States. So yes, our goal is to change that dynamic. And that's why the president's doing what he's doing.
But of course, General, to change that dynamic requires regime change, does it not? Is that what he's essentially saying?
He is essentially saying that, but, you know, Maduro doesn't have to have all that support from the Russians. He doesn't have to have a relationship with Cuba. He doesn't have to have a relationship with the Iranians. He chooses to do that. So if he wants to survive, can the leopard change its spots? That's the question. And if it doesn't, then I think the Secretary of State's made pretty clear that this is going to be a continually tightening noose on Maduro. I hope we don't go in on it with troops on the ground, though. I hate to see that kind of a fighting in a crowded area where there's a lot of weapons on the other side. This is not Panama of 1989. This is a much different setting. It could be that it could be easily done. You could perhaps snatch Maduro out or put him under pressure, have him renounce, have him disband his people and so forth in return for some kind of exile, maybe give him a little cash bonus to sweeten the pot a little bit, get him away. If you have to go in on the ground and actually fight a bunch of people in Caracas and in the area where the port is and so forth, it's going to be destructive, probably going to take some losses, and it's certainly going to look like big, bad, ugly America again. I'd like to see us do more with the Organization of American States, with the other countries in South America. It can't be good for them what Maduro is doing. And we should be the good guys in this, not the bad guys. So we should be working with them and encouraging them to pressure Maduro to get out.
News alert. Kaboom. Kaboom. Another boat off of the coast of Venezuela just got blown to smithereens. And these weren't fishermen on a shipwrecked crew. They were bad hombres, narco-terrorists. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth ordered the lethal kinetic strike earlier today as part of Operation Southern Spear. 2 narco-terrorists are reportedly dead. This comes just after Trump gave Maduro a late Christmas gift, a missile to Venezuela's drug-loading docks.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs. So we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
Maduro thought Trump was bluffing when he threw around the idea of land strikes. Guess not. The docks are about as close to home as it gets. Guess the dictator should have listened to all of the warning shots.
You have to understand what he's done. They've sent billions of dollars of drugs in, but maybe just as bad, they've sent hundreds of thousands of people in from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions and insane asylums, the drug lords, the drug dealers. Every boat that we take out, we save 25,000 lives of Americans.
Oh, Maduro, you've been a naughty fellow, and your country now isn't so mellow. Because strikes are falling on land, you, my good sir, are outmanned. It's not just Christmas for old dictator Nick. There are a few others on the naughty list who deserve a big old kick. We're not just talking about you, Ilhan. Our eyes are on the state of Iran.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up. I hope they're not doing it, because we don't want to waste the fuel on a B-2. It's a 37-hour trip both ways. I don't want to waste a lot of fuel.
When Trump says don't, he means it. If Hamas doesn't stop the shenanigans, they're getting wiped out too.
If they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay for them.
Trump's calling the shots around the world right from his Mar-a-Lago escape. Not only did Trump throw his swanky Christmas party, but he had lots of visitors too. Today, Bibi came and gave his favorite president the grandest of gifts.
We decided to break a convention too, or create a new one, and that is to award the Israel Prize, which in almost our 80 years, we've never awarded it to a non-Israeli, and we're going to award it this year to President Trump. This was announced formally over lunch by our Minister of Education, who's responsible for the Israel Prize. It's going to be awarded to President Donald J. Trump for his tremendous contributions to Israel and the Jewish people.
And Trump is reminding the world who got the job done.
Put it this way, every hostage just about that's been released was released because of me, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, my whole team, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth. They were all released because of us. None were released in the Biden administration, none.
That is true. Families are together for the first time in 3 years, just in time for the holidays. And all Trump wanted for Christmas was peace. Zelensky came by for Christmas dinner and even wore his best suit. Trump thought it was he was in such a great mood that he even threw some food at the press.
Outside and have some food. Would you like to have food, or do you consider that a bribe? And therefore you cannot write honestly, or therefore you have to write a bad story. Okay, because if you'd like, would you like something to eat at this time? Yes or no? You can speak.
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay. Margot, yes, sir. Take them outside, tell the chef, serve them a little lunch, okay?
And they were so thankful, he offered them lunch again today.
If you'd like, you can come up and have lunch like you did yesterday. Would you like that or not? Do you want that? Because some of them think it's terrible, it's a bribe. But, you know, a bribe for $25, I don't know. If you'd like, you can go, and if you don't, you can stand in a driveway and melt.
Z loved Palm Beach too. So much, he's starting to ask, DC who?
He walked in, he said, "This place is gorgeous." I don't think he wants to go to the White House anymore. That's the problem.
I'm ready to go to the White House.
I know. It is. The White House is a very special place. And so is this. I hope you enjoyed it.
Trump loves being the gracious host, especially when he had a peace deal ready for dessert. Sources say a deal between Russia and Ukraine is closer than ever. If Trump has to go to Kiev to get the deal through, he will.
I've offered to go and speak to their parliament. And, if that would help, I don't know if that would help. I think it would probably help, but I don't even know if that's...
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I know.
Always.
So I'm not sure that it would be really necessary, but if it would help save 25,000 lives a month or whatever it may be, I would certainly be willing to do that.
And Putin might be ready to salsa dance, too.
I saw a very interesting President Putin today. I mean, he wants to see it happen. He wants to see it. He told me very strongly. I believe him. Don't forget, we went through the Russia hoax together. I think we're going to get there. I know him very well. I was on the phone with him for almost, I guess, 2.5 hours, they're just telling me now. It's a long time. We discussed a lot of things. We didn't talk about the weather.
Although Zelensky isn't so sure.
Is there any indication that you see that Vladimir Putin wants peace by what he's doing or saying?
Me not, be honest. And I don't see it because, first of all, I don't hear it publicly. His messages, he doesn't speak about peace. Now he doesn't speak. He says that he can go further. It's not the signals of peace.
Trump knows the war is a lose-lose for both sides. And the longer it goes, the worse it gets.
What happens in a few weeks if things sputter? What are you prepared to do?
They keep fighting, and they keep dying. No good. But if things don't happen, they keep fighting, and they keep dying. And we don't want that to happen. He doesn't want it to happen. President Putin doesn't want it to happen either.
The president's ready to get this war over with so he can shift his full attention back to where it matters, our own backyard. And he has his A-team handling it. Even MSNBC knows it.
I think the establishment in Washington has something to learn from Trump's unconventional diplomacy, totally breaking diplomatic precedent. Look at his diplomats. I call them cowboy diplomats, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff. They have no experience, and yet sometimes they get stuff done.
The Biden doctrine who? There's a new sheriff in town, and everyone knows his motto. Mess around and find out.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.
China has launched what it's calling major military drills surrounding Taiwan, using naval, army, air, and rocket units to encircle the island. It is releasing a lot of video for the world to see exactly what it's doing, and that's deliberate. As part of its exercises, China says it will conduct live fire drills. Taiwan is accusing Beijing of military intimidation. As we know, China has long made claims to the island and appears to be flexing its muscle after the U.S. announced a multi-billion-dollar plan to sell weapons to Taiwan. This afternoon, President Trump, however, downplayed the chances of China taking military action.
Well, I have a great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it. Well, they've been doing naval exercises for 20 years in that area. Now people take it a little bit differently, but in fact, larger than they're doing right now.
Let's get perspective from the region now. I'm joined by CNN senior international correspondent Will Ripley, who is reporting extensively from Taiwan, where he's based. He's now on assignment in Thailand. First question, Will. You've been following these exercises for years, and the fact is they are getting bigger and more frequent. How does Taiwan view these exercises?
Well, obviously, they're concerned and trying to sound the alarm globally that exercises today could be real military action tomorrow. These are, as of the latest count from the Taiwan Defense Ministry, the second largest that we've seen that they've reported to date. The largest was back in October 2024 when there were 153 aircraft that were spotted near Taiwan in a 24-hour period. We've got 130 military planes spotted along with 22 ships as of the latest update a few hours ago from Taiwan's Defense Ministry. So it wouldn't shock me if these do become the largest. You've already seen the video. The really disruptive thing is going to be these live fire exercises today where they're actually going to be using live ammunition out in the open sea, but they've actually had to shut down some airspace and shipping routes. In fact, some of the flights, about 1,000 flights could be affected. So if we had tried to fly in here today from Taiwan, there's a chance, Jim, we wouldn't have made it in. So certainly disruptive. Not believed to be leading to an actual military conflict at this stage, but of course the big fear is that these drills keep pushing the line closer and closer to that red line.
This is not the first time we've seen China ratchet up military drills in response to actions by the U.S. Of course, Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island, you remember you saw a big spike in activity after that. Now you have this weapons sale. From China's point of view, how significant do they see those U.S. weapons sales to Taiwan?
Well, obviously, this is the reason that they're giving, maybe not publicly, but a lot of people are speculating this is the reason why they're doing these drills now. But as you correctly point out, they've held military drills 6 times since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022, and they have been getting larger. They have been getting closer to Taiwan. They've been considered more aggressive. But this is the kind of thing that requires months of planning and organization, and then essentially they decide when the weather conditions are right and there are conditions happening geopolitically that they deem suitable to send a strong message. That's when they decide to do it. So obviously they had these plans in place for a while. They're now choosing to do it just days after a record $11.1 billion arms sale between the U.S. and Taiwan, a massive weapons sale that Beijing has condemned. But also, let's not forget there have been a lot of simmering tensions, not even simmering, really boiling over tensions between Japan and China. And so the fact that they're deliberately trying to show that they can block foreign forces, foreign military assets from getting close to Taiwan, the fact that they're trying to demonstrate that so clearly this time, it's a signal not just to the U.S., but likely to regional allies like Japan as well, Jim.
Yeah, no question. Will Ripley, thanks so much for joining. Well, joining me now is Beth Sanner, former Deputy Director of National Intelligence and CNN National Security Analyst. Beth, good to have you.
Great being here.
I wonder if China is testing Trump a little bit with these exercises, knowing that Trump's priority is keeping this trade truce with China in place as best he can, and that perhaps Beijing feels it could push the limits a little bit more with military action around Taiwan.
Well, definitely, I think that Beijing is always looking for pushing the limits and seeing how far they can go. And as Will was talking about, why we've seen this ratcheting up of the size and scope of these types of military operations, but really the daily flights that are coming across and halfway across the strait that separates Taiwan from China. And so all of this is part of, creating this new normal, and now is a great time. One, because the president is busy, and, he's the focal point of so many things. And secondly, because they know that President Trump right now is trying to keep the peace with China. And they want to keep very much this administration, this trade truce that was agreed in Seoul or in South Korea. And they want to have this summit in April in Beijing, and they don't want anything to mess that up. And so, of course, he's going to downplay this.
It's interesting, when he was asked about the exercises, Trump, he downplayed the chances that Xi will take military action against Taiwan. He even incorrectly said that these exercises were no bigger than those in the past. It strikes me that the pattern is quite similar to how he approaches Vladimir Putin, where he downplays, for instance, Russian military activity in Ukraine, but often scolds Zelensky. How does Beijing view this? Do they see that as Trump subtly giving them a pass?
Well, we don't know. I do think that right now, when you look at the behavior of China toward Japan, and the call that President Xi had with President Trump, which reportedly was to ask President Trump to call Prime Minister Takaichi to tell her to back down and to apologize, which she has not. So I think that they do see an open door here in terms of pushing President Trump to allow them to have this sphere of influence, right? And they see that both Putin and Xi and President Trump very much kind of think in these terms. And so they have greater range for action, I think.
I mean, that falls under what has been a theory about the Trump foreign policy, right, is that he does see a spheres of influence globe where let China have its patch to some degree, Russia its patch, and we, the U.S., are going to take maximum action against Venezuela or even, say, Greenland. I mean, do you see the roots of that?
There certainly are parts of this administration that feel that way, but then you look at the national security strategy, and a lot of the language on the Pacific is very similar to the last two national security strategies, Biden and the first Trump administration, where it's talking about making sure that another power, not mentioned, not named, China, but that another power cannot dominate this area because it's so important to the United States in terms of global commerce. And of course, Taiwan, 90% of our high-end semiconductors.
China fired rockets into waters of Taiwan, showcasing new assault ships in its most extensive war games to date. The two-day drills, named Justice Mission 2025, were held about 2 weeks after the U.S. announced a record $11.1 billion arms package to Taiwan. The Chinese military said the drills were aimed at deterring outside intervention. The drills this week marked the largest by area and the closest yet to Taiwan. Taiwan's President William Lai said in a post on Facebook that troops are prepared to defend the island, but it is not seeking to escalate the situation. And for more, CNA's Deborah Wong is joining us live from Shenzhen with Victoria Jin standing by in Taipei. Now let's get to Deborah first. Now, Deb, the PLA says its operations around Taiwan today had, I quote, the desired effects. What exactly did the military mean by desired effects, and what was achieved here?
So that comment is specifically referencing a drill where we saw a joint exercise between the PLA, the Navy, the Air Force, as well as the Rocket Force launching what we see as a long-range joint strike. And videos showed that all these strikes eventually hit the intended target. And so it means that the PLA believes they can execute coordinated multi-domain warfare to quash separatist forces as well as external forces. And with tighter containment and a concentrated blockade that we've seen in this round of expanded military drills, we are noting that it's also targeting critical infrastructure in the north, the south, as well as military bases around these important parts of the island. Now, the Eastern Front has also been targeted because that's where observers say is the main channel that's used by external forces to support the DPP. Now, this exercise, we've also noted, stands out for another reason, and that's really visibility here, because Chinese observers as well as netizens note that the PLA has been releasing a whole series of social media content on their website as well as on Twitter account now known as X. So we've seen videos of patriotic music, with of course all these strikes happening. And aside from that, we've also seen a whole series of posters that they've released. We've seen a shield over an island. We've also seen 2 hammers hammering the top part of Taiwan as well as the southern end, another showing a dragon horse, which essentially translates to 龙马精神 in Chinese, which in military warfare referencing really high morale and endurance in a long-drawn multi-domain warfare. So all these social media posts, they've attracted a lot of comments on social media with netizens calling for reunification. They're talking about national pride as well, collectively sending messages of military might to an international audience, and really giving the world a preview of what's to come if the world decides to test China's bottom line. Now, CNA spoke with a retired PLA senior Colonel Zhou Bo. Have a listen to his interview.
I think this came without much prior notice. So that is something interesting for me because I think there is also another major change. That is, this is a kind of a direct response to America's unprecedented arms sales. Because in the past, when America sells something, normally it would invite a protest. But here it has actually invited a military exercise around Taiwan Island. And I believe this kind of paradigm shift will continue in the future.
Now, Deb, how are these drills likely to impact U.S.-China relations, given that it's taking place after that record U.S. arms sale to the island?
So Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has given the most explicit clue in his speech in China this morning. In fact, he says that there will be consequences. He mentioned that while the China-U.S. relationship has been rocky of late, stability and coordination, mutual respect is something that both countries should work towards too, because it is, after all, a very consequential relationship for the world, and such as in the matter of Taiwan, which China views, of course, as an internal affair. And so Wang Yi says it's only natural for China to firmly oppose as well as take forceful countermeasures in the face of repeated provocations. In fact, the Chinese Foreign Ministry this afternoon took a much more harsher, stronger stance in their reply when they were asked about Mr. Donald Trump's response to the live drills. And Trump, in fact, mentioned, before I get to that, the Foreign Ministry says that the drills were a severe punishment and also a necessary move to safeguard national sovereignty. So we do really have to look and see how this will eventually impact U.S.-China trade negotiations, whether China will perhaps scale back some of its export licenses for rare earth, or even stop buying U.S. soybeans. Trump's reaction to the exercise has been quite mild, perhaps paving the way for a planned trip to Beijing. Angela.
Thanks for that, Deb. Well, let's bring in Victoria Jen live from Taipei into this conversation. Now, Vic, Taiwan's defense ministry has been holding a meeting.
A new reporting from MS Now details how the Trump transition team did not learn until days before the inauguration that his pick for White House border czar, Tom Homan, was under investigation by the FBI for allegedly accepting $50,000 in